Well, hello and welcome back, everybody, to the DanJohnUniversity.com podcast. I'm Dan John. This is episode 192. I'm here each and every week answering your questions, and it's an honor. Remember, if you have questions, send them to us at podcast@DanJohnUniversity.com, and I'm happy to answer each and every one. I'm currently working on a supplement to the Easy Strength Omnibook. And if you want to read the Easy Strength Omnibook, go to easystrengthomnibook.com and it's available there. About Easy Strength for fat loss, I've written a lot of new material. There's a lot of there are some parts from my earlier writing. You have to do that to explain things. But one of the things I'm working on lately is a lot of people struggle with certain aspects of the program. So if you have questions, why don't you just leave them down here in the comments, and I'll do my best to comment on them. But what I'll also do is I'll take your ideas and then I'll write a chapter or make a clarifying point as best I can. I really appreciate that when people do that. There's no surprise to this, but sometimes you'll watch a movie and they maybe have left out, I don't know, like a point of logic in the movement, something to make some clarity. That's why I like director's cuts and deleted scenes. Sometimes you'll look at a deleted scene and go, why did they, there's a deleted scene out of 4 Weddings and a Funeral where they explain, and it's like 10 seconds of how they all met each other. And that's it. They cut out 10 seconds, which would have given so much clarity to the show. They cut out in the Harry Potter movies a lot of stuff sometimes. I think this way. I'd rather know what the missing pieces are before I send it in to the publishers than to find out 2 years later, well, why didn't you talk about, this, and then go, oh, that's such a good point. So help me help you, as they say in a movie. And if you have any questions about Easy Strength for fat loss that really need some clarification, please let me know, okay? And just leave them down here in the comments. I appreciate that. Okay, let's get started. We have a lot of questions today, and there's at least a few bounce over the same ideas, but there's one or two that just seem to me like you guys just want to start fires, but I'll answer them. All right, here we go. We got a question from Mike. I'm a 55-year-old male, lifting since middle school. Good for you, and I hope that is awesome to hear. And now aiming at to maintain capabilities for as long as possible. Strength, mobility, functionality, etc. And I know exactly what you mean. He wants to do that more than just hit some new personal best in my sport or the weight room. My question is, what is your suggestion on what to do when you hit a local maximum in some lift, if your goals are like mine? At my age, I realize any particular peak I hit this year may be hard to exceed down the road, like I could expect when I was 20 or 30. Jim Schmitz, the great coach of the Sports Palace, calls Masters Olympic lifting the farewell tour, because after you make a clean and jerk, you look at the bar and you say, farewell, because you'll never see that weight again. What's weird is it's true, and it's breaking my heart. But I like your point, Mike. I will try, of course, as hard, to keep going. But for the sake of the question, let's suppose I never really get much better in some particular lift. How does a 50 to 60-year-old like me best keep their fitness and abilities when they reach some new maximums? Well, if you don't mind, let's look on two sides of this question. Is it possible for you to break lifetime PRs in the weight room or in competition as you age? Well, there is a way to do it, and it's not PEDs. But if you never took, like powerlifting, for example, is a very good example. If you never took powerlifting seriously and you decided to, if you put on the knee wraps and the super suits and the belts and all the rest, with the bench gear, the big bench gear they wear now. My buddy, who was a really good powerlifter, once said that I would have easily benched over 500 if I would have worn the right equipment, I come here thinking, yeah, but that's not going to help the discus go far. And in fact, I got to tell you, Mike, remember that story, because it's a good one, because the power lifter was thinking about the platform at a meet doing maximal attempts in the 3 lifts. I was a discus thrower who took that same 3 lifts and then tried to translate it out onto the field of play. And that is always going to be an issue when we talk about strength and conditioning. So at the first level, if you choose wisely, you can always get personal records. I've noticed this at Olympic lifting meets that the masters numbers are really getting big at these local meets. Now, the lifting isn't always very good, but the thing is, if you've never snatched and clean and jerked and then had a total, the combination of snatch and clean and jerk, it's pretty easy to have lifetime bests just by showing up. If you decide to do any sport, really, you're probably going to get lifetime bests, when you've never done something before. So in a sense, if you decided to take like a sport seriously, I can guarantee your numbers would go up. The downside is 55 is that, and I always make the joke, I have one more injury in me, but I don't have one more recovery. And that might be the kind of thing to think about. Now, let's take that. Okay, so take that concept, which was basically me saying, yeah, you can. Your numbers can go up. You could go to a gym that specializes in certain things. You could quit your job and train full time. I'm not saying that's a great idea. Or option 2. Now, staying a strong, mobile, flexible, using the functionality as long as you can is a very good thing to chase. You said the number 55, Mike, which it seems to be a line in the sand. In my experience, Nick Rain's experience, and a lot of other people who I trust. And I'm not sure what happens at 55. I'm not sure. But it seems for a lot of us that we start getting those issues with lean body mass at around 55. I still joke, when you come off the holidays, when you're 65, my age, you look at a bagel, you put weight on, that's the joke I always use. Of course, I also eat the bagel, so maybe that's the problem. After 55, your lean body mass begins to have some issues. It seems to be much easier to put on body fat. It seems much easier to lose muscle mass, which is the opposite of what we want to be doing. So after 55 is a wonderful time to be a weightlifter, a trainer, Mike, because now bodybuilding now makes sense to you. I have a little membership at a place over here, and I go in 2 to 3 days a week. Now, in my home gym, it's all for me: Olympic lifting, front squats, kettlebell work, rucking, walks, military presses and some other stuff, deficit deadlifts, hip thrusts, that kind of thing. But when I go over to the gym, I use their machines and I go for the lactic acid burn, or whatever they call the burn. I can't remember what it causes. I think it's lactus. So I raise my reps on machines and I try to go for a local burn on the exercises. I try to hold my technique as good as I can. I do change the weights a lot and play around. I try not to use the exact same number of plates every workout. I don't necessarily use progressive resistance exercise as it was kind of, written out by DeLorme. But what I try to do is I try to have a little variation in the load so I can have a little variation in the reps. So my thought is, because I'm trying to build up some hypertrophy, some, lean body mass. And by getting the burn, I'm going to, ideally, I'm going to get my fibers to grow, and then, I'll have, whatever, barnyard wide shoulders and wasp waist and all the other Frankenstein monster kind of terms you hear from the bodybuilding world. And that's all fine. So the first thing I'd recommend for you and anybody over 55 is to make sure you have a role of bodybuilding in your training. So for me, it's 2 or 3 times a week. We're talking really, we're talking 10, 12, 15-minute workouts for me to go from machine to machine to machine. Not very long and just enough. But I'm also training 3 days a week on, squats and presses and, the Olympic lifts or whatever, hip thrusts. The other thing I want you to think about before we talk about this other factor on strength is mobility. After the age of 55, any of that motorcycle accident you got into, that ski accident you got into, the time you tripped on the curb, all those injuries kind of just, I wouldn't say they rehappen or reoccur, but you will start to pick up that you've been injured before in certain joints. And as I've said many times on this podcast, mobility is the free movement, in my way to explain it, around the joints. And I always do my thumbs and fingers and wrists when I'm doing this, because I'm not going to show you the rest of my body in this out of this desk. So for me, lean body mass and mobility sort of kind of take over as first place after 55, Mike. What you'll find, and I think there's some truth to this, and this would come from books like Younger Next Year, Dr. Barb Arnott's book, Turning Back the Clock, and a few of the other better longevity books I have. If you can kind of get youthful muscle again, that's what it's called in one of the books, youthful muscle, I think it helps a lot. If the mobility and some appropriate flexibility, I push aside 1 day a week to do it, a tonic Thursday. And we use those active isolated stretches. We mix original strength mobility work with active isolated stretches. If you do that once a week, that's probably good enough. So a couple days a week, a little extra hypertrophy work. Couple days a week, maybe just in the morning, some mobility work. 1 day a week, mobility and flexibility. As often as you can, walk. I mean, I'm not going to, I think in one of the last episodes, I talked about, we went from 2,000 steps a day as a recommendation to 16,000, it seemed like, overnight. And that's never a good idea. I try to walk for 45 minutes a day, walk. Those are my walks. That's what I try to do. Now I toss in, and those are just walks. These aren't, I'm not trying to impress the world. These are just strolls. If I have to up my heart rate, which the best part of getting older is you don't have to work to hit your maxes on your heart rate where you should be for training. You don't have to go as hard anymore. Yay for us. But if I have to, I'll do either, I will put on a weight vest or ankle weights or use heavy hands, but nothing crazy. So, and that's sometimes called zone 2 conditioning, but it's quite light. So let's review. I would say about 3 days a week if you mixed strength training with some bodybuilding. 2-3 days a week, the mobility. 1 day, a real solid mobility, flexibility day. Walking probably every single day, and I don't know if that's even beatable. That's something it's kind of like a must, I think. That is going to be this great base and foundation. What I recommend for most people I keep dropping the numbers. I mean, I'm even thinking 22. I mean, I've dropped all the way down. Is that maybe 6 weeks, 12 weeks a year, you could do a nice big program where you intelligently go heavier every week, maybe cut the volume every week. In other words, what we call a peaking program. I think there's value to it. Last year, I did a 12-week peaking program for an Olympic lifting meet, and frankly, it didn't help. I do just as well when I do easy strength for fat loss with Olympic lifting. My numbers were the exact same because at my age, the repetitions, the mobility, the flexibility, and showing up at a meet refreshed and full of energy is more important than, making these numbers that are on a piece of paper. But I think there's value to it in your sense. So maybe you could find something as simple as, as many people know, I'm a big fan of Wendler's 531 program. You could run that, 3 times. Marty Gallagher's 12-week peaking program might be a really good idea. You can find it in his book, Purposeful Primitive. There is a mention of it in his book, Strong Medicine. And if you find his blog at Raw, I think he goes over it in pretty good detail. And if you're on Dan John University, he gave us a program in there, which is really quite nice. And that'll save you a lot of searching around the internet. But maybe something like that for 12 weeks. That's 3 months. The other, how you work it out, I don't know. But say, 6 to 8 months a year, you get your bodybuilding in, you get your basics in, you go for your walks. Find a time where you can commit to 3 months of training on a peak. Do it. Either compete in a meet or just have a local friendly with spotters you can trust and see how things go. 55 is not was it movie back in the day, the 70s? Death Wish. It's not Death Wish. You're not. You're doing fine. The only thing I do recommend is that you're going to have to have a bigger base than you did as a plus 55 trainer than you did when you're like 18. You can't just jump into a peaking program. You're going to need those 5-6 months of general training, getting yourself in that thing we used to call, it's funny, the word was called in shape. I am in shape. And it's weird because I know exactly what in shape means. And it's weird that people who train a lot don't. But I'd like you to get into the peaking program in shape so that you can handle, I wouldn't say the wear and tear, but the volume and the increase in intensity over time. Mike, this is a very good question. I hope I answered a little bit. It's been done, what you're doing. And right there, I think the secret is in there. It's been done, so do it. And I think that's the key. Putting it off another 10 years to get your workouts in and get your walking in isn't going to be helpful long term, at least from what I understand. Thank you. Good question. Really good question. Graham, again, I think in the prologue to this, I mentioned that there was a couple questions that were pretty similar. Doing my best to answer each. Graham writes, you mentioned at 55 things change. To move from strength to hypertrophy. As a beginner to weights at 52, what reps should I do? I want to increase strength. Do I strength program for 3 to 4 years, then transition to hypertrophy program? What warm-up weights should I use for a working weight? This is unclear to me. Well, 52, an untrained 52-year-old, you're still on a learning curve, as I understand what you're telling me here. There's a couple things I want you to think about first. First off, I wouldn't worry too much if I were you about getting a perfect program. Now, I do have a workout called the Perfect Workout, and that's more of a ha-ha joke. But one of the things I'd like you to think about, if you haven't read my work, if you're not familiar with the way I see strength, please go to easystrengthomnibook.com and get the book, okay? Go to Kinko's or go Office Max and get it printed out. It's funny because a few people have shown me their bound copies, and it's far better and far more reasonable than some other resources about like the river in South America that I usually work with. I think it'll help you understand the big picture of things. And then I write extensively in the book about this question about age. For you, your biggest thing now, since you're relatively new and you're candid about that, and I appreciate it, is something as simple as at danjohnuniversity.com, we have the workout generator. One of the things you need to do, and don't worry, there's no magic line in the sand. You hit 55 and, all of a sudden, your ghost falls out of you like in some movies or anything. That's a funny image. But at your age, with kind of you're going to have to learn some things. One thing I would recommend is when you go in there, just find a very basic, simple workout, maybe 3 days a week. And then when you go into where it says push, pull, hinge, squat, loaded carry, or whatever, it's going to recommend certain lifts to you. I would scroll. You can just you can use your mouse, or if you have a pad, you can just scroll up and down. I would actually, if I were you, Graham, is play with, let's say we give you 15 horizontal press options. That sounds about right in my head as I think about it. You know, that's 5 weeks. One workout, you know, on Monday you do this variation. On Wednesday there's a slightly different variation. On Friday there's a slightly different variation. At the end of the 3 weeks or so, you've trained a lot of different exercises, but also during that time, you've probably already gotten some clarity about, yeah, this was a good idea. Yeah, I'm way too far ahead for this. This is something I need to learn more about. And that's something I think is a good idea. If you don't mind, a general criticism of most people I work with today is a lot of people went to a trainer who said that this lift or this exercise or this movement or this pattern is the answer to all your questions. The reason I know that is I know this idiot. His name's Dan John, and he thinks that way about everything. I'm the worst. I mean, I just kind of fall in love with something, and then I think it's the antidote to everyone's issues. I know I'm not alone in that, but it is kind of a strange thing how we do that. Having said that, you know, the other day I told somebody they wanted a perfect workout in 3 moves, and I told them the hip thrust, the alternating press, the seesaw press, and the ab wheel. And they said, why'd you pick those? And I said, because they're the 3 simplest exercises I know how to teach. So, I mean, the next workout would be snatch, clean and jerk, and suitcase carries. And, you know, if you look at those movements, actually, that would make a great article, you know, hip thrust, alternate press, ab wheel versus snatch, clean and jerk, and suitcase carry. You know, the road between those 2 movements would make a very interesting story and study. So one of the things you need to do is you need to learn a variety of movements of this, you know, of the subcategories. So push, pull, hinge, squat, loaded, carry. Now in the squat family, there's really, I think there's probably 4 actual movements. You would use the goblet squat, the overhead squat, the front squat, the back squat. Yeah, there's the Zerchers and there's some single side stuff. And, you know, you can throw in some other things. But really, the big 4 is what, you know, you'll need to know. So in the squat movement, by the way, and the squat takes a little bit more time to master than, say, the pike push-up or the floor push-up or incline push-up or something. You know, learning the squat just takes a little more time for most men, especially. So you could probably get more reps practicing that. But what you need to do is you need to practice and learn the whole family of exercises. When we talk about reps and sets, I did a podcast with Basketball Strong this morning, and Basketball Strength. And one of the things that we talked about is that, you know, when I was young, the numbers were pretty set. You know, basically 1 to 5 was the strength and power movements. Delorme is quoted with that in 1951, saying the same thing. The Delorme numbers are basically 8, 10, 12. Those are the numbers that kind of get you right in that good hypertrophy window that also still, it's good for power. And I found that 8s, 10s, and 12s, if you're having the athlete go down slow, up fast, down slow, up fast, down slow, up fast. We do that now with chains and bands. I like those numbers for, you know, using to teach acceleration. And then, of course, you know, we used to say that above 20 was muscular endurance. If you read Clarence Bass's early works, he used to do, he used to do weeks with 2 sets of 20 to 25. Every 4 weeks, he'd do a week of just those numbers. And now there's people who are saying, well, actually the perfect workout is 2 sets of 20. So those numbers have come back. I like this from most people, Graham, is that if you can just kind of remember. So basically, if you're doing about a total of 10 reps in the workout, 5 sets of 2, 3 sets of 3, 5, 3, 2, 6 singles, whatever. those are usually your pure strength workouts. And once you slide up to 15 to 30, the DeLorme numbers really, those are your hypertrophy and power numbers. If I said we're going to do 5 sets of 3, 3 sets of 5, 5 sets of 5, 3 sets of 8, 3 sets of 10, most of the traditional numbers you see in most good programs historically, that's kind of in the ballpark of that 15 to 30. Those total numbers, so 3 sets of 8 is 24 reps. That's between 15 and 30 total reps, just for clarity, okay? It seems to be, it's been true a long time, and it really has held up for a long time. The rule of 10 and the rule of 15 to 30 are just things that I think have stood the test of time. And I still stand by that. So for you, if you go to the workout generator, it's going to tell you week 1, 3 sets of 8, week 2, 3 sets of 10, week 3, 3 sets of 12. If you're sticking with the same exercise, by the time you get to 3 sets of 12, you pretty much smoke that exercise for a few weeks, and then you just shift over to something else. I think there's value to that. As for warm-up weights, I don't know if I've told you guys the story of Wilt Chamberlain telling me warm-ups is warm-ups. I told my discus thrower that today, that story, but warm-ups is warm-ups, and I'm quoting him. So you might need more reps to warm up in the squat, and your buddy Phil needs more reps to warm up the hinge, the deadlift. When I'm Olympic lifting, I tend to need more reps to warm up for the snatch. I don't need almost any reps to warm up for the clean and jerk. At meets, throughout most of my career, I'd often just take one clean and jerk. Very often because, I was, especially with the local meets, I had to follow myself. I would snatch, follow myself, snatch, follow myself, snatch. And that got me huffing and puffing. So I'd wait and then do a clean and jerk to just make sure everything was in place. And then my opening attempt in a local meet would have been my last warm up. Then we'd go to a traditional first attempt, and then we'd see what happened then. With your warm-ups, it might be a good idea for you to think what I just said through. I know this, that for me with pulling exercises, I need to do a lot more suspension trainers, T's, Y's, I's, single arm rows to get myself, kind of warmed up here because of all those years being a North American where the workouts are bench press and push-ups most of the time. So I have that issue. It's much better, I'll be honest with you, where I get a little bit too much like this, and I needed more pulling to kind of put things in alignment. So I need to warm up my pull far more than I need to warm up my push. And this is the interesting phrase I'm about to use. Your mileage may vary. And I want you to figure out what your mileage is. So for me, if you were to come in and it's a very simple, a very easy movement for you, a movement you've mastered, you don't need the attempts, the warm-ups that you would need for a movement that you're a little shaky with. When I was young, we were told you shouldn't lift in the Olympic lifts. Until you were warm, you shouldn't even go above 60 kilos. And if you weren't hitting 135 pounds, 132 pounds, and if you weren't hitting, the lightweights feeling smooth and easy, you just kept warming up until you did. And I can remember in junior college, I went to junior college at a place called Skyline College in San Bruno, California. The foggiest area, it could be so cold, the fog would just pierce through your skin. I mean, I can remember many times where the warm-up was so much longer on those foggy, cold days. I rode a motorcycle to college and to the Pacific Barbell Club. I threw out the discus. I was throwing the discus outside for 3 hours before. I'd get to Dick's gym and, I would just be, I'd be frozen here on those spots where the helmet didn't protect you as well. My hands would be frozen. So on those days, I would warm up a lot longer. Well, in the summer here in Utah, I don't warm up very long at all because all you got to do is walk outside, turn the corner, and you're sweating already. So I hope that answered your question. We had 255 questions back to back, and that was actually just interesting by itself. Okay, we have a question from Trey. And Trey says this: recently I have started implementing your goblet squat, broomstick overhead squat combo. For those of you who missed the drill, I think it's in the perfect workout, but I also show the drill. It's like one of my magic drills, but it's the goblet squat to the overhead squat drill. And it's fairly simple, but it's impossible to explain, very easy to see. On Instagram, you can see me do it in the perfect workout for sure. I've only been training for about 2 weeks, so I have a lot to learn about the movement, but I was wondering if you could share your logic or why this is something to train. It's interesting, working with somebody the other day. The person had all kinds of, did all kinds of things like yoga, did all these things, had a whole bunch of issues. So just on a lark, we had the person do the goblet squat, and then at the bottom, you pick up the broomstick and you put it overhead in a snatch grip and stand straight up. Well, the person, when they stood up, the stick never got over their head. The stick was always out front. And very quickly, we saw that they might do yoga, they did Pilates, they did all these things, but they weren't actually mobile and flexible. Now, and certain joints were mobile and flexible, but they couldn't. So the overhead squat since 1988 has been my go-to assessment for my athletes. I have them pop a bar over their head. I watch them overhead squat. I'm good enough now to see issues. I look to see from the front, so me looking at you, the chin, the sternum, and the zipper in a straight line. That's the first thing I look for from the front. The second thing is I look to see that the position of the zipper essentially is kind of in the middle of the the hips. So if the person is on the ground like this, there's their legs, and they're over to a side, which you see all the time, then I kind of say, well, what's going on? Very often, my kickers and my throwers will be kind of offset a little bit. Now, I know that. I went through my career doing this. And the reason is, that you start to get a dominant, strong leg. And then, when you drop in the bottom, your body, kind of leans into it. The other thing on the side then, when I'm standing here, you're now me coaching, and the bar's over my head, then I look to see if the biceps are on the ears. I want to see the chest up, and I want to see you dropping between the legs. Very often, people can't do any of those. So that's mobility, flexibility for me. The other thing about the goblet, so first off, it gives me a chance to assess and do a daily assessment. Just one overhead squat can be a daily assessment. It gives a ton of feedback into what's going on in your whole system. If you can overhead squat months and then all of a sudden one day you lose everything, well, let's talk about what happened, okay? Auto accident, bike accident, bad night's sleep, too much marimba, whatever it is, okay? We'll work on that. And then finally, the goblet squat to overhead squat. Now, we were doing sets of 8, and then we moved it to sets of 5. So a rep in this would be a goblet squat and an overhead squat. So when we were doing 8s, the numbers slid up to 16 total reps, which I thought I started to think about it. It seems a little high. So now we're doing 5, the goblet squats and the overhead squat. That totals up to 10. That's a little bit more in line with what we think about, numbers in the weight room, which I just talked about with another question. When you do that set of 5, goblet squat, overhead squat, it really does impact your whole body. That's one of the things I picked up doing when we used to do the 8s, is my heart and lungs became the problem, not the load. And it was kind of sneaking into an endurance thing, or more like doing a complex. And if that's why you're doing higher reps with the goblet squat, overhead squat, I applaud it. It's a very simple complex that will get your heart rate buzzing. But, if you're doing it day in, day out, maybe it's not the best choice. I'm a big fan of it, and I think it makes a difference. on a one-on-one call I had with somebody on the inner circle, we kind of concluded that this would be the go-to exercise for this person with their needs. A big engine person, somebody who's done a lot of really pretty impressive things throughout their whole life, but got to a certain point in their life and career where all of a sudden, being the person who kicks down the door isn't always the person that, it's that life change where you go from the person, putting out the fires to the person, making the report about the fires, and this person had slid over to being the person who wrote the reports. And all of a sudden, very quickly, the chair, the lifestyle of office work started to impact this person dearly. And so the goblet squat, overhead squat, that 3 days a week in this person's case, was a nice reminder about where we want to get back to physically. And it didn't. I think it was about week 2. I got that classic kind of, text back, "You're a miracle worker," or whatever it was, because it really did help. So that's why I like it. So I think from a heart and lung perspective, it's an interesting way to get those jumping. From a mobility, flexibility standpoint, I really think it's good, especially when you're assessing your own personal day and, kind of that, I don't know how many of you assess yourself every day. I kind of do a little check-in with certain movements every day. That's why I hang every day and sit at the bottom of a goblet squat every day. Because if I hear just 1 or 2 pops when I hang, that's not bad. That's I feel good. Poor man's chiropractor. But if I jump up and hang and my shoulders are killing me, that indicates that's an assessment that, something I did the other day was wrong. So it's a good assessment, good for mobility, flexibility, kind of good for the old cardiovascular system. And it's also an easy way to get it's an easy way to get a lot of work in a short amount of time. So in other words, in my very complicated language, win, 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 win. All right. I hope that helped. All right. Thank you. Greg, I'm here in Utah. Hey, Greg, it's good to have another Utahn on the call. So I spent a lot of time this year shoveling snow. Yeah. I love your ideas about training to be able to live independently into old age, being able to put a carry-on in an overhead bin, lift a child, get yourself up off the ground, etc. It's funny about the up off the ground. Tell you, I took my meditation course today, and Barbara's wonderful. She's really a good instructor. So she does offer the option to lay on the ground, and I stood up to go get a mat, and she said, "I knew you were going to do that." And after class, I said, how did you know I was going to do that? She goes, "You're always talking about getting up and down off the ground. And whenever I'm invited to get on the ground, and sometimes I'm invited by my grandchildren, sometimes by my dog, I get down on the ground because I think that's important." So thank you. So one thing I'd like you to keep in mind, Greg, is that just, to get up and down off the ground, it's a good idea to voluntarily get down on the ground sometimes. Strange segue. This morning while I was shoveling, I was thinking about being able to clear my own driveway as I get older. Here's an idea, Greg. When you finish clearing yours, come to my house and clear mine. Okay. Obviously, I could always buy a snowblower, as I thought this year myself, but I was wondering, which kinds of exercise will you do in the gym to train for shoveling snow? What a good question, because after all my years of discus throwing, I discovered something this year, is that when I start throwing snow, it's really important you throw snow both directions just to keep your back in line. So it's not just about shoveling snow, it's about being independent. Let's make sure we keep those two things separate. Hey, let's just go through the basics first though, Greg. Are you going to the doctor every year? Because if you're not, let's stop having this conversation. Let's find out stuff early rather than later. Since you live in Utah, Greg, I'm going to recommend you see a skin doctor appropriately. For those of you who don't know, Utah, we have a very weird climate. Lots of snow in the winter, lots of sun, very hot days in the summer. Where I live is called high desert. We had the Winter Olympics here, and of course, it also gets, you You can hurt yourself touching a kettlebell outside in the summer in my gym. You can burn your hand. It's that hot. It's crazy. Are you seeing the dentist a couple times a year? I go 3. You should go 2. Go see an eye doctor if once a year. So, okay, take care of that. If you're only sleeping 6 hours a night, I want you to sleep 7. If it's only 7, I want you to sleep 8. Sleep is huge. How are you doing on your vegetables? And I know I say this all the time, Greg, and I know a lot of people are listening going, oh, he's talking about eating vegetables again. Eat vegetables, eat protein, drink water. Make sure you take care of those really basic low-end things. Floss your teeth, brush your teeth. I scrape my tongue because my dental hygienist told me to. And she was right. By God, she was right. There's some other things in the world of recovery. You might hear it as it's just right next door. I'm a big believer in sauna and meditation. I already mentioned that. I use the sauna to, there's something about heat reactive proteins or something like that it's good for. I also like it because it allows me to turn my engines down every day. When it comes to longevity, so the way I organize things is push, pull, hinge, squat, loaded carry, everything else. For longevity, everything else becomes more important. Hanging, brachiating, monkey bars, crawling, Turkish get-ups. I thought I would never talk about Turkish get-ups again. Okay. Tumbling, rolling, original strength, Tim Anderson's idea of, getting on the ground and, doing mobility on the ground. Any course you can take that has flexibility where you get down and up off the ground. So when you're thinking about longevity, you sort of have to flip this over. So ask yourself some questions. What am I doing in the area of hanging? What am I doing in the area of getting on the ground? So think about that first. For longevity, it's funny how I think you've already kind of popped into it on the question. Loaded carries become very important as you age. And that's why I push suitcase carries and bear crawls so much. Going to the grocery store once a week is great. Doing loaded carries every day is even greater. And then of course, it's push, pull, hinge, squat. The squat becomes important next. So for longevity, number 1 is the everything else, the ground and the hanging. Then it's the farmer walks. I think the suitcase carry and heavy bag carries are the best for the question specifically here. Then it's something as simple as keeping your mobility by doing your goblet squats. If you're hanging and doing your goblet squats, those are pretty low-end ways of maintaining both of those things. From there, the hinge movement. Now we start to move into the weight room. I would love to see you do rack deadlifts. It used to be called the health lift back in the day. As I understand, the health lift goes all the way back to the Civil War here in the United States. I am willing to be told I'm wrong. It's just this exercise people go in once a day. It was actually, I understand the original one was kind of a almost like our pin select weight systems now. And you just pick this heavy weight up, you'd hold it and you'd put it down, and there was your workout. There's a great picture of Arnold in a weird bow tie, deadlifting this massive stone when he was a young man, and as Mr. Universe, strongest man, and I think it's Bavaria, maybe it might be Austria, but it might be Bohemia. No, I think it's Bavaria. That's the lift. I mean, there are all kinds of things. I got some pictures in there of Bruce Lee doing isometric deadlifts, at that position. So rack deadlifts, where you deadlift the bar 1 inch below the knee to 1 inch above. I think those are money. If, like my brother Gary's a big fan of the trap bar deadlift, good for you. And then for most people, it's pulls next. I like suspension trainer pulls, TYI, get the burn, feel good. And then honestly, with most North Americans, I don't have to talk about the push or press, but I do tell people to start to do more vertical pressing as they age versus horizontal. Your issues in life are going to be much less holding a defensive lineman off of a quarterback and much more putting cans up on a shelf and putting your luggage up in that little cubby. So yeah, good question. And I do want to throw one thing out. You got to train your brain. And I train my brain with meditation. I train my brain. I try to read a variety of things. I try to train my brain in a number. I play a lot of, I don't know if you can always see it, but my chessboard is right there. My Connect 4 is there. And I also play a lot of checkers for my Europeans, draughts, I think you guys call it. I like playing games that make me think. But I got to tell you one thing, and you'll be very popular after I tell you this. Dance. If you can, dance classes, dance lessons, going out to dance. I'm taking a dance class. I'm not going to be on any TV shows or anything. The exhaustion you get from dance class is something I've never experienced in my life. Now, in college, I was in a modern dance. I was in maybe 3 of them because, well, there's a lot of good reasons. We'll save that for another show, okay? But yeah, one of the things with dance is that, like my dance instructor Stan says, you've got to move with the music, okay? Well, this big thing up here, this thing called my brain, has to process that noise, interpret it, send the concept to my feet and my upper body because I'm pulling my partner this way and I have to move my feet in a certain way. It's exhausting because, the human brain eats up tons of energy. So when you dance, not only are you physically moving your body, but your brain is working very hard to keep up with all the stuff going on at once. And it's a lot of fun, and you can do it for a lot longer than you think. But I'm going to throw in anything along the lines of dance, anything that makes you think and move at the same time. There's a thing called orienteering. I don't know how popular it is anymore, but it's where you get a map and coordinates, and you need to look at the map, figure where you are, go touch, pick up a flag on, hill number 7, and then go pick up a green flag on, the tree on 18 or something like that. And I think there's value there. I'm not a huge fan of golf, just not, but you can, the thinking process of golf, if you walk and you play golf thinking, I think there's value to it. Now, if all you do on the golf course is smoke cigars, drink beer, and I think it's called duff, good for you. But if you take any sport seriously where you're thinking, I think that's good. The upside of dance, it's a social thing. It's kind of fun. I've never heard anyone say they lost at dancing. And so there's that, and that'll kind of keep your brain a little bit more healthy. I hope that helped. We've had a lot of questions about longevity today, and I appreciate it because it makes me think about things too, and I appreciate that. Thank you. Okay, so Adam asks a question. Are the close wide grip bench press the most effective method for increasing my pushing strength? Also, is it normal for my pure shoulder military press to be heavier than my snatch? Oh, okay. So 2 different questions. For pushing strength, I still personally, Adam, and I'm going to tell you this, and feel free to go ask anybody else, any other expert in the world, strength expert, but I like this. I learned this years ago from a really good throws coach, and it basically comes to this. And I'm going to tell you to do it in 2-week blocks, but obviously if you're not very strong on any of these, it could be 6 weeks. 2 weeks of bench press. After the 2 weeks of bench press, you've kind of stalled just a little bit. 2 weeks of incline, 2 weeks of military, 2 weeks of decline, repeat until you're done pressing. I still think that's the best way to train it. Now you can say, I need longer to adapt. Okay, then make it 6 weeks. I know that when I finally moved to this as an older thrower, it was like, you could hear the birds sing and the angels play their harps on inside my shoulders, because it made my shoulders feel so much better to stop doing that one shot. With John Price, we used to bench press a lot because John was a great bench presser. But I started getting back to the incline because I knew that was going to help me. When I slid back to the incline is when I actually started throwing farther again in my late 40s. I don't necessarily think it was the bench press is bad. I think it was I had to readapt to a new position. Now I would look at that and I would say, okay, 2 months a year, I would go up to the gym doesn't exist anymore. The gym I used to bench press with John. The next 2 months I would incline. The next 2 months I would, wherever I could do it, military press, either clean and military press or take it out of the racks and military. If you can't find a place to decline, because you do need kind of a special setup for decline. A lot of better bodybuilding gyms have them, but not a lot of places do. Interesting, the new place I'm doing my extra workout has one. So isn't that funny? So for me, the best way to do it is to do it like that. Now you might say, there's some other questions. I know that the bench press for some people is the answer to all questions, but for my money, that's a much better thing to do, okay? On the next question, is it normal that your military press be better than your snatch? In the great tradition of lifting, Adam, if you could press and snatch your body weight, you were considered by everyone strong. If your press goes ahead of your snatch, which started to happen a lot in the late 60s and the early 70s, when the press was still, it might be that you're maybe, adding a little bit of, backward lean, and you're adding all those other little tricks and tweaks to get your press up, which, there's worse things you can do. That's you're lifting up, so yeah, for you. But there are people who are just naturally better at snatching and naturally better at pressing. You might want to go ask your tailor, or if you go buy a shirt, if you're like me and you go buy a shirt, by the way, I've never bought a shirt. I get my shirts special ordered. And I know when the listeners those are watching are like, I just don't see it, but I got a weird body, like, a lot of people, because of my shoulders, basically every shirt off the rack, I've got two issues. The sleeves are always too short, and there's way too much waist shirt. So I get my shirts tailored hard. Not this one, but I get my dress shirts tailored hard this way. And then we also add a few extra inches here so that I can wear, I think I'm a 37 sleeve, but if I buy a 37, but the shoulders only go to here, then I need like a 39-inch sleeve, 40-inch sleeve, and it just doesn't work. So the snatch, it's easier for me to snatch, has been most of my career, than to military press. My best military press, I clean and press 300 and I snatch 314. But when I clean and press 300, all I was doing was focusing on the press, because it was a goal of mine from my youth. 2000, 2001, maybe I did it. It's a long time ago. And so it could be like, if your arms are, if you buy a polo shirt and you can, wear it, around your wrists, you're probably a pretty good presser because the range of motion is so short. That was an exaggeration and very strange, but I think you get my point. Certain body types press better, certain body types snatch better. The clean and jerk seems to be the one where you get the benefits of both sides. That was a good question. All right, well, next one here. Yeah, on this one here, good. Okay, Ben, I'm answering your question. I don't want to. I don't want to get into these internet blah, blah, blah wars where people who generally agree struggle. But so here you go. This is from Ben, and I appreciate it. Starting strength and Mark Ripito, I wonder what he could ask about, has doubled down on their kettlebell stance with their latest article, How to Use Kettlebells for Strength Training. And when you read the article, it says something along the lines, it's mostly useless. Okay. And then the author, Captain James Rogers, he's a Canadian, just makes a lot of jokes. The same kind of jokes we always, we make about all kinds of things. Don't forget, in my gym at the Pacific Barbell Club growing up, if you put collars on anything that wasn't approaching a big lift, you got made fun of, because if you can't control a 275 pound snatch, then, you're not tough enough. Now, if you did 305 and you used collars, that was fine. So we made fun of people for using collars. So everybody has their own little pecking order of what they think is stupid and what they don't. Trust me, I think a lot of things I see online are really stupid. Really, really, really stupid. I think a lot of people, in fact, a few of them I know, are risking their long-term health for pictures on Instagram. And they're going to pay a price down the line for, making certain decisions. And I don't think that's a good idea. That's me. So, Ben tells us, I've had a positive experience with starting strength, but it seems like kettlebells are a useful tool. I agree 100%. Ben, you and I are good. I think kettlebells are wonderful. And their condescending stance is confusing me and makes me question their motives and credibility. But are kettlebells just conditioning, or can I get big and strong with them? My young friend, yeah, you can get big and strong. You can get big and strong with a rock, man, if you took it serious. I've said many times, and Brett Jones used to quote me on this all the time. I said, if you put me in a situation where all I had was a 16 kilo kettlebell, and I took it seriously, in 6 weeks, I would come out of this prison or whatever it is, stronger, with better cardio and looking better. Which makes you wonder why I don't look better every 6 weeks. But yeah, I think kettlebells are really good. I sometimes think that one of the mistakes I've made in the last few years is not doing the kettlebell snatch as much as I used to. That's a regret of mine, because I think the kettlebell snatch, if you're built the way I'm built, maybe built the way I'm built in between my ears, the kettlebell snatch is a very good way for me to get certain benefits on the cardiovascular side without the pounding on my hips and knees. If you take double 48s and you press it for a set of 12, I'm going to tell people that you're strong, and I don't care. I don't care who or what you are. So yes, I absolutely think you can get big and strong. The strange thing about this particular, there's a couple things about. So when I went in to read the article that you sent me, Ben, so I'd know what you're talking about, the first article that popped up was an article about my hero, Lee James, and two of the best pictures I'd ever seen of him, both by Bruce Clemens at the 76 Olympics. And I modeled the way I dressed after Lee James. Everything that came out as article. If Lee James would have said to do 3 sets of 20 in the front squat, I'd have done 3 sets of 20 in the front squat as my workout the rest of my life. So there's a lot of good stuff at starting strength. This whole thing about their knock on the kettlebells, I get it, because it's kind of a fun way to brand yourself. We used to have a shirt at a high school I coached at. Girls play volleyball, boys play basketball, men wrestle. Now, I still think that's kind of funny. Now, I obviously couldn't say that today. I'd get, I don't know, whatever happens to one when they say something offensive nowadays, that would happen to us. But, I get it. When you're like I wrestled in high school, and, when you come out of a wrestling practice, it's kind of hard to think anybody else does on the campus is hard. I remember after wrestling, the football coaches, we're going to do this to you guys today. And those of us who had wrestled were like, no matter what we do for wind sprints or conditioning, it's not even as bad as 5 minutes of wrestling practice, you know. So there's a certain branding. So if you're a high school wrestler, there's a certain branding you throw out there, like, you know, rah, 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 we're wrestlers and we're better. You know, and there's other sports that are like, yeah, that might be true, but we're rich and you're not. You know, and there's another sport that says, well, we're X and you're Y. And we all do that. So I understand from a branding standpoint why they would do that. Listen, right now, as I'm telling you this and people are watching, you know, people are going to fly over to that site and, you know, ring the bell and read the articles, and it's good for their business, and it makes sense. I was a little surprised when I read up about Captain James Rogers, because he's a Canadian, and as you gentle listeners might know, is that I'm a half Canadian. Yeah, I know. And I'm just shocked that a fellow Canadian would say something negative. Now, obviously, the whole article he wrote is tongue-in-cheek, and I get it, because that's what you do. I mean, if you go back to the RKC forums of 2003, 2004, 2002, 2003, when it was much more of a us against them mentality, you would have seen articles like this, you know, on the RKC forum. This really, you know, there's us and there's you, and, you know, is it the sheriff experiment that we all had to study in psychology about? That's just the way we humans do it. I believe there's an interesting movie called 2001: A Space Odyssey, where you see it happening right in the beginning. I'll stop there. I understand it from a marketing perspective. I understand it, you know, an us versus them. I understand that. But the essential issue I have is that why would anyone ever say any other modality has an issue? Because they're all good. No matter what you're doing right now is better than 19 out of 20 people, because most people don't exercise at all. Most people retire without enough money to survive very long. Most people don't floss. So I support anything you do, and I'll do my best to help you do it. I'm not going to throw stones at anybody. Well, that's enough for now. But it's a good question. But I'll just say this. If I would have had kettlebells as a youth, and I would have understood a few things about the Olympic lifts, I think I'd have been a lot better thrower. And I can't say that for the squat, and I can't say that for the bench press, because I did a ton of them. And, you know, I never trained ever for the deadlift. And I pulled the biggest deadlift at a powerlifting meet without ever training it. Well, I've told that story before. But let's stay positive, and let's just keep in mind that kettlebells are pretty damn good. And I don't understand why you would even spend the time making jokes about them. Having said that, I'm as guilty as anybody for making fun of certain things. So it's the pot and the kettle here, okay? Thank you. Good question. It was a good question. Okay, a real quick question. My dogs are hungry. I have to get going here pretty soon. Kevin, my question is, do you think that is wise to take about 6 months to focus on bringing up a lagging back squat to catch up with my relatively stronger deadlift? I am definitely a hinger, but would like to get my back squat around 400 pounds for athletic performance, okay, and would replace deadlifts in the Olympic lifts with less taxing movements like swings and reverse hypers for the time being. Any help would be greatly appreciated. Kevin, I like this idea. Anytime someone says to me, okay, since you're an athlete, is it okay to ease up on these things to try to push this back up? Yes, yes, yes. Now remember, when I push my back squat up, you know, my senior year, I think I've told this before, I never went over 385 pounds, 175 pounds in the back squat, because I'd read something from Vasily Alexiev that you never needed to squat 10 kilos over your best clean and jerk. Now, I should have gone heavier because, well, I was clean and jerking 363, 165 pretty easily. And so I just said, okay, 385 is all I'm going to do. I was told later by people at a certain very important place in the United States that I need to get up my squat. Well, I got my squat up to 605 for 3. I don't know what it is in kilos. Sorry, it's lighter. It's less than 230, but not much. And for 3, and I would have done more, except I could see in the mirror the spotters and they were freaking out. But it didn't help my throws. But I like the fact that you're looking at the number, that threshold of 400 pounds, which my friend Dan Martin has said to me several times, that's probably all you ever needed to squat to be great. So I like the idea. I think it's important, and I hope all of you remember this. Let's just go through. Push, pull, hinge, squat, loaded carry, and then everything else. If you have one of those movements that's clearly lagging, now you break it down even more. You've got a 400-pound bench press and a 95-pound military. I think you're getting held back by your military. You can do, you can row with 600 pounds, but you can't do a pull-up. Well, again, you might want to look at this through. If you deadlift 700 pounds and you front squat, 65 pounds, let's get that fixed. So I'm a big fan of what you're going to do, Kevin, is look at what you're doing, look to see that there's balances. The best thing I could hope for an athlete would be this, is that you're not super in anything. Yes, I believe that I'm a push hinger. And I get the sense you might be also along those lines. Now, as a push hinger, those are the exercises that are going to take me into the wonderland. But the squat, the pull, the loaded carries, groundwork, hanging from things, monkey bars, are what going to keep me healthy and my whole system ready to handle those big loads so I can have superior athletic performance. So I'm with you. If you're Olympic lifting and you're struggling to get that 400-pound squat, I doubt you're far from it. You said 6 months. It might be faster than that, okay? I'm just spitballing, just guessing from what I'm reading, okay? Well, that was a long episode, and I'm getting complaints from the canines in my home. It was relatively quiet in the house until it became time for them to eat. As always, if you have questions, email them to us at podcast@danjohnuniversity.com. I do my best to answer each and every one. Reminder that the book Easy Strength Omnibook is available at easystrengthomnibook.com. And thanks for all you guys do for me. These questions today were fantastic. And until next time, let's all keep on lifting and learning. Thank you.